Archetype studio head James Olin and founder of the studio is leaving. Mostly, we'll get into those details in a bit. The studio is making kind of a spiritual successor of Mass Effect with a bunch of other BioWare former developers and executives. I want to talk about what him leaving, for the most part, may mean for the game in the studio, for better or worse. So let's jump into it. Okay, so this reporting started off with Jason Schreier over at Bloomberg posting a kind of a breaking news thing, a scoop. Other articles are being written now, like this one I'm showing here. Bloomberg pay gates their articles, so I can't show it. So here's the Kotaku version. So the title is Godfather of BioWare Design steps down as a studio making an ambitious successor to Mass Effect, that successor being Exodus, the studio being Archetype. So James started the studio in the 2019-2020 times. I believe he was already there for a tabletop small venture with them. It sounds like kind of talked into getting back into the regular gaming world. He is more of a veteran on the BioWare side of like the Baldur's Gate, Dragon Age kind. The Mass Effect he has a credit on, I believe. I don't know if that was really his passion as much, which would kind of make sense. He's there at Archetype with Drew Karpyshyn. That's who wrote the first two Mass Effect games, wrote the books for him. I believe he's written the books for Exodus as well, but is definitely writing for the game itself. So this move is weird. The timing is rough. Just like they quoted Mr. Holton in here, who a day before this news broke talked about how like James Olin is who you should thank for Exodus existing and all this stuff. So tough timing on his part. This is interesting. So the reports is that he's stepping down as the head of the studio and he's going to remain a consultant. I don't put too much into that. I suspect he's still willing to give his advice, or if there's something that someone needs to know that only he would know, he's willing to give that info, but he's not going to be running day-to-day operations or really getting into it. So take that for what it is. The reactions to this have been interesting. I feel like a lot of the kind of legacy games media folks see this as a pretty bad sign for the studio and for the game itself. Right now, we don't even have a release date for the game. It's most recently in their Game Awards trailer. This is early 2027. I still think that they don't have a date or even like a month is a bit concerning at this point after it's been internally and externally kind of pushed back over and over and over again. Now they have, the head of the studio and the founder leaving. In this kind of crucial time. The reactions, like I said, from kind of games media are pretty negative. I've seen people who are like more like fans of the game, or people who are like specifically excited for this game, be a little more optimistic about it, saying things like, oh, the game's probably done, they're just doing polish and stuff like that. I don't think that's probably true. Maybe it could be. Maybe they figured this out to finish the game content wise and then just get to spend a year plus polishing. They've shown so little of this game, and even what they showed in that Game Awards trailer I think looked pretty rough, not very finished, pretty outdated, not really looking all that great. So maybe that's the style they're going for, or maybe it's just not quite finished yet. I think hoping that the game is like done and they're just finishing it at this point, and that's why he's leaving. Possible. Optimistic, but possible. I think a little more realistic. He's just kind of burned out and he's done. I think the pessimistic way to look at this is that things are going bad there. It's going to be a disaster. He's getting out before that happens. I think that may be a bit over the top, but I do have some concerns about this for a few reasons. Recently, in a video that Mark Dara made, who's another former BioWare executive, he talked about how there's this idea that the final push to get a game out isn't like that big of a deal. It's just, if you look at a game completion from pre-production to shipping it as a 0 to 100% thing, it's not that simple. Where the first 80% of making a game is doing the pre-production and making the environments and making the models and animating and recording voice lines and writing the game and figuring out the gameplay and mechanics and the engine and all that. And then the last 20% is just putting it together and shipping it out. Mark Dara made a point in his video of that last 20% of shipping a game is as much work as the first 80%. So it's, this idea that, you say a game takes 6 years to develop, the first, 3.5, 4 years, maybe a little more, you're figuring everything out and you're building the pieces. Then that last year or two, you're putting them all together, and that is as much work as before. Now, that all depends on how good pre-production was and planning was and how consistent leadership is and all that. That's why this move, I think it is concerning. I think personally, any take other than that this isn't great news is being a little overly optimistic. I could be wrong though, and that's okay. It's not a shot at anybody. It's just me seeing this happen before with other studios and other games. I think what's especially concerning about it is that we're under the impression that Archetype is a relatively tiny studio of like a few dozen people, and they're using a co-developer to do a bulk of the like heavy work on this game. That means that coordination phase in that last 10, 20% of development is just going to be harder. You have people who are not on site making a big chunk of your game, and you're having to do that really tough execution of bringing all the things together and making them work and then fixing the things that don't work. But you're not just doing them with your team in your building or who are directly report to you, but you're doing it in collaboration with a whole other studio. um that's an industry standard at this point. If you look at most modern, especially big games, it's completely normal to do this. So it's not like they don't have, this experience or whatever, but there is a concern in that this is their first game, that this is the first game they've ever released, right? And that's hard to do, even with a bunch of industry vets. And now we have this kind of added tough spot where your studio head is now stepping down or pulling back to a significant degree and just becoming a consultant. Now I believe they've already replaced him or named a replacement, someone from Blizzard, who's at least going to take over that role in some capacity. Take that for what it is. I don't know much about that person. I think what my biggest concern is in the long run with this is that they made this company and greenlit this project mostly based off James Olin. And now that he's gone, that liability becomes so much bigger of a deal for Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast, who's already not known for being exactly the best companies on earth, especially Wizards of the Coast. And Hasbro, they have their fingers in a lot of cookie jars, right? They're not just a game developer or a game publisher. They do lots of other things as well. I don't think that Exodus is going to get shut down. I'm sure it's going to come out eventually. But I would say their situation gets significantly worse with him leaving. And I don't blame him. I'm sure he's got his reasons for doing it. We'll probably find out in the Jason Schreier article 3 or 4 years from now what happened here. But I don't wish anything bad. I want this game to come out. I want it to be way better than I think it's going to be. I want it to come out and be that Mass Effect successor that takes things to the next step and pushes the next Mass Effect game to be this bigger than ever thing or whatever. I just, I've been saying it for years at this point. When they announced this game, when Exodus was announced, I was very early in my Mass Effect fandom, and I remember being like, "Oh, cool! The people who made this thing I like are making something else that looks kind of similar, but has some cool new ideas." I was extremely excited. But just over the years, just this trickle and the way that they've handled the trickle of information, the way that they've handled talking about this game, it's just really kind of thrown me a little bit, made me not feel super confident that this game is like going to be anything like what they want it to be, or for better, for whatever reason. And now your studio founder of your studio who hasn't put out a game yet, who's trying to wrap up their first game and is in literally the hardest part of that process, the studio founder leaves. Look, I'm finding it hard to like find the silver lining here. But like I said, I don't want this to be bad. I'm hoping it works out. Maybe it will. People who, in theory, like Mr. Holton, who they had quoted in that Kotaku article, said that he thinks that maybe the game's finished and they're just going to polish it over the next year. He literally just got flown out to the Game Awards by Archetype and Hasbro and spoke to a bunch of the developers. I mean, he would know as much as anyone, right? So I I'm just observing from the outside. I'm just giving my kind of gut feeling. Um, I think this is weird. This is a strange situation, and I think how they handle it is going to be interesting. But I also am really curious to how Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast is going to handle this, because again, if they signed off on this project because of him, and now he's for the most part disassociating from the project, I just, ugh, you know, it's tough. So I'm gonna wish for the best. I'm never gonna wish for a game to fail or not come out or have major issues. I hope it comes out is a 10 out of 10, is the greatest new Western RPG we've ever played, and I can make a whole video about how wrong I was about it. That is the best case scenario, and that's what I'm going to be hoping for, even if my gut's telling me that might not be what happens. If you want more updates on Exodus or Mass Effect, BioWare, or just gaming news and updates in general, please consider subscribing to my channel. Hit the like button on this video so more people see it. Leave a comment down below with how you are feeling about this news. And if you really want to support what I'm doing here, consider becoming a YouTube member. You get videos like this one just a bit early, as well as some other perks. If you want to see my other content like my podcast, check out the links in the description of this video. You can also find ways in there to support what I'm doing, like buying some merch. Get yourself a coffee mug and send me a picture of it. That'd be really cool. That is all I have for this one. So until next time.